بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Inshallah, barakallahu feek, Dr. Bazian. Inshallah, we're at our final speaker for our conference today. And I know it's been a long day, and I appreciate everyone's patience. And Dr. J has given me the hand. And I've introduced him many times, so I'm not going to take too much time. But the most important thing you need to know for all the Bay Area people that are visiting, and they tell us, we have Sheikh Hamza, we have Dr. Hatem, we have Imam Zaid, we have Imam Tahir, we have Ustad Abdullah. And I can say, alhamdulillah, we now at the University of Southern California, we have Dr. Sherman Jackson. So the topic for Dr. Jackson is Whither, the Modern Muslim Negotiating Creed, Theology, and Spirituality. And in interest of time, I'll have Dr. Jackson explain what he'll be talking about. Assalamu alaikum.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, nasta'inahu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nastahdih. Wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu. ومن يضلل فلا هادي له واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى اله وصحبه وسلم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي امري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي وقني شر نفسي وفلت لساني من اضل بغير حق رب العالمين. وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته. First of all, I want to start out by saying that I'm just a little bit perplexed by the fact that I was just told that I'm supposed to explain the topic that I'm talking about, but the topic was assigned to me, and I didn't choose it. So I've been assigned the topic of Whither, the Modern Muslim Negotiating Faith, Creed, Theology, and Spirituality. But I want to preface my remarks with a number of what I hope will be sort of useful comments, suggestions, if you will. The first of them is this. I'm here as a part of a community, and it is my hope that if the last 10 to 11 years have taught us nothing, they have taught us our mutual need for each other as community members, and that there is strength in our numbers, and that we need each other. And I say that in the context of trying to set up a context here for my remarks in which what I'm saying up here is not understood to be an attempt to offer any kind of last words on anything. This is not a debate. This is a conference. And a conference is a mu'tamar. I'tamara means basically to come together and to cooperate among yourselves in an effort to bring about the best possible outcome. And the reason I'm saying this is that, I'm going to have to talk, and again, I was assigned my topic. I'm going to have to talk about issues of theology and all of these kinds of things. And I remember, that decade of the 90s when as a community, every time we got together, we tended not to discuss matters among ourselves, but rather to debate. And by that I mean that, I would stand up here, not me, those other guys, but I would stand up and I would present my position as if it were the last position, and then I would defend that to the death, even if it was not the best position. And as a community, I think that we suffered a great deal from that. And I hope that we have reached the maturity where we can come out of that, where we can begin to see, as corny as it may sound, our diversity as a strength and as something that we should not be afraid of. I'm not going to compromise what I believe to be my deepest principles, but I'm going to be open enough to understand that some of what I believe is essential with regard to Islam. Other aspects of what I believe are not essential. And these are issues that there can be give and take on. And there are issues on which someone else in the community may have a better point of view than I. So I hope that, we will remain open to ourselves as a community. That's the first point. The second point that I want to make, can I get some water? No, that wasn't the second point. But the second point that I want to make, no. The second point that I want to make is that, when I was assigned this topic, I thought primarily about the young people in our midst. And so most of my comments are going to be going to, sort of college students and below. And part of the reason for that is a certain recognition that I have that I hope I'm not being too heavy here, but it's a reality, and it's a reality that we as a community are going to have to confront. And that reality is this. If we come back to this Zaytuna College banquet conference 20 years from now, it is very likely that I won't be here. It's likely that Sheikh Hamza won't be here. Imam Zayd might not be here. We are reaching the point where you're looking at a generation that is going to be passing on within the next 2 to 3 decades. And that means that we have to prepare the way for those who are coming after us. We have to have the collective communal consciousness to understand what that means. And part of I think that what we are missing as a Muslim community, we are missing a sense of historical consciousness. We don't understand where, what, and why we are where, what, and why we are. And I think that that's something that we have to do a better job of. So in the comments that are going to follow, I'm looking primarily at the young people among us. Finally, let me say that I'm going to be, because I've been asked, I keep saying that, don't I? I'm going to stop saying that. All right. I'm going to be talking about some of the challenges that confront us in terms of theology, in terms of faith, in terms of spirituality. And I just want to sort of not warn us, but point out the fact that, sometimes when we talk about problems, and Muslims have lots of problems that are confronting them these days. But sometimes when we talk about problems, it can dampen the mood. It can put us in a state of mind where we think that life in itself is nothing but one long, boring concatenation of problems. All right? I'm going to be talking about challenges, but I don't want Muslims to internalize, the sensibility, the idea, the feeling that our lives are nothing but a long chain of problems. We live in a time and in a place where, yes, we do have problems, but we also live in a time and a place where we have unprecedented resources and opportunities. And away from our dealing with many of the problems that we have to leave space to contemplate how we are going to best use our resources and how we're going to best take advantage of the opportunities that we have that other Muslim communities across the globe could never even dream of enjoying. So I don't want everybody in here just to be thinking about problems, although that's, in a sense, what I'm going to be talking about. So the issue of negotiating theology, faith, spirituality in a place like modern America. Of course, negotiation is itself a give and take enterprise. It's sort of the art of give and take, and that includes compromise. And I know that's a dirty word for some Muslims, especially when you're talking about issues having to do with religion and theology. But there is principled compromise and there is unprincipled compromise. And I think that anyone who is familiar with the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam knows the difference between principled compromise and unprincipled compromise. And for us to be able to negotiate the things that we're going to be talking about today, it's important to know the difference between what we can and what we cannot compromise, and to be clear in understanding that difference and to be resolute in our commitment to maintaining that distinction. This means, to my mind, that theology has to come front and center. In a sense, it is first and foremost, because it is theology, far more than any other of the religious sciences, that gives us the sense of the absolutely non-negotiables of Islam. I mean, even in fiqh, I can, as a matter of fiqh, you know, I can drink some wine if I'm choking and I don't have anything else to save my life but wine. I can drink wine under duress and still be a Muslim. But I cannot believe that God is three, or that God has children, or that God didn't even forbid wine drinking. I can't do those things. I can't believe those things and still be a Muslim. So it's important for us to understand what leads and what follows in terms of our religious commitments and our beliefs. And when it comes to theology, we have a number of challenges in America, and there are many of them, and I'm only going to have an opportunity to talk about maybe three or four of them, but I hope that what I have to say will be useful. The first challenge that we have, I think, is a challenge that some of us might not be familiar with in this room, but I'm an academic. I'm interacting with young people on the college level every day, and I have been for the last few decades. And one of the things that I am repeatedly being confronted with is the fact that our children who are passing through the academy and institutions of higher education are internalizing an epistemology, a way of knowing, a way of comprehending reality and assessing reality that is placing distance between them and religion, distance between them and Islam. They are coming through the university system. They're internalizing a way of thinking, a way of knowing that is itself fundamentally alienated from religion. And at the end of 4 or 6 or 8 years, they're coming out of these institutions and then being asked, now reconcile Islam with yourself. And among the major features of this epistemology is something that some refer to as scientism. This is a major challenge, not just for theology, because of course theology comes after the very idea that one accepts the existence of God to begin with, all right? We are in some ways challenged with the whole enterprise of the very existence of God. And so we have a challenge of how do we sustain and approach others with talk about God when one of the reigning epistemologies not only denies but precludes the very existence of God by denying and placing beyond the realm of legitimate engagement anything and everything that is supernatural or above and beyond the material world. This is what, and by the way, you know, Reinhold Niebuhr, the great Christian theologian, talks about irony, you know, and it's ironic that the more successful we are as parents, the more likely we are to produce children who go to college. And yet the more likely we are to produce children who go to college, the more likely they are to become susceptible to precisely this kind of an epistemology, right? And so it's the better off among us, if I can use that term, all right? who should perhaps be most concerned about this as a challenge. Now, how do we begin to address this challenge? There are two things that I want to say about this very briefly. And again, especially for our young people here who are saturated with the presuppositions of scientism. I think one of the first things that we have to do is we have to get clear and we have to maintain the distinction between science and scientism. I'll say that again. We have to be clear and we have to maintain the distinction between science on the one hand and scientism on the other. Science, as a study of the physical world, is an enterprise in and of itself. The claim that there is no reality beyond the physical world, that's not a scientific claim. Or that's not something that science can prove empirically, although it is a claim of some scientists. All right? We have to be clear about distinguishing science from scientism. And therefore, our opposition to scientism does not necessarily have to imply opposition to science. Because when we oppose science, and by the way, science is not all one thing. I'm taking for granted that I'm talking to intelligent people. Science is not all one thing. All right? There are many different scientific theories, not all of them equally reconcilable with each other. I don't have to go into any details about that. But again, part of the problem that we have to be careful about is that, if in the interest of promoting our commitment to religion, and if in our attacks on scientism, we come off as appearing to be opposed to science, we will actually undermine our position rather than promote it. And this is one of the reasons why I say we have to be extremely careful about remaining clear on the difference between science and scientism. That's an important distinction for our young people to get. And it's important because, on the one hand, if God is indeed beyond